So let's see how we would use these things in Python, because you're going to be using particularly for loops, but you'll use while loops a lot as well. But for loops you'll be using all of the time in your code. So let's take a very simple example here where let's say we want to count up to 10. Now, some of you noticed last week in the little exercises that Python, like many programming languages, begins counting from 0, okay, most of the time. Not for all, there are a few things where it starts counting from 1, but generally Python will start counting from 0, so you need to bear that in mind. So let's say we want it to count from 0 up to, but not including 10, so in other words the number 0 to 9. Then we want to recreate this for loop, which basically says do this 10 times. So print a number, increment the number by 1, and then keep going back round until we've reached the value of 10. And this for loop will do exactly that. So this is the way in which we write a for loop in Python. We use the word for, and then we use this, which is referred to as the index for the for loop. Now I've used X here. You can use anything you like. You could use jam donut if you wanted to. It doesn't matter. It's the name, effectively, of a temporary variable that the for loop will use to indicate where it is at any point. Okay. Once that for loop is finished, that variable is disposed of. So you don't use it. It's only used for the for loop. Okay, so you can use it whatever you like. Generally, if you're using something like this where you're going counting up for a range, you generally use a single letter. X, I tends to be used quite a lot. Doesn't matter. You can use whatever you like. So here I'm saying for X in, and then range brackets 10. That says give me the range of numbers ranging from 0 up to, but not including the value that I put in here, so 10. So this will give us the values 0 to 9. Okay, so range effectively gives you an iterable object. It's a list that gives you the numbers up to, but not including whatever number you put in. Okay, so this tends to get used quite a lot for for loops. So if you want to do something 10 times, you can put in 10 here. You'd have to worry about the fact that it mostly that it starts from 0 for that. It'll just do this, whatever you tell it to, 10 times. We then use a colon, just as with an if statement, and then when we hit enter, we'll be indented, and that means everything that is then indented, we've only got one line of code here, but realistically for a for loop you probably have multiple lines of code. Everything that is indented there will take place in the for loop. That means it will happen, in this case, 10 times. And the thing I want it to do in this case is to print this index. So it's just going to print the number that I'm counting up from. But it could be anything. It could be print hello Dan. It would say hello Dan 10 times. Okay. So if I were to run that code, this is the output I would get. It would first print the value 0. Then it would increment automatically, because the for loop will automatically then go and increment to the next index value. So it'll become 1. Then it'll print the next value, which will be 2, etc. Up to, but not including 10. So it'll get to 9. When it then ticks over the index to the value 10, that's the point at which it stops. Okay, so you need to remember that the value you put in there, it will not include that value. So you'll get 10 iterations. Those 10 iterations will be from 0 to 9. And as I said, the code in the for loop can be anything we like. So in this for loop, this is saying for X in range 5, so do this stuff 5 times. That's this stuff, not this stuff. This stuff here that's indented, do this 5 times. And I want you to ask, get an input from the user, which can ask for their name. It'll store it in a variable called name, and then it'll print using an F string, hi, and then whatever name they've put in. So if you were to run that line, this code, it would ask for their name 5 times and print whatever they type in each time. Okay, so in this case I've put in Dan. The next time through I said Dan, etc., etc. Okay, so whatever, it'll ask for the user input 5 times, and it'll print the that message with that user input 5 times. And then down here, this is the line of code that is run after the for loop has completed. So you can see here, 5 times we got these hi messages, because it was going through this for loop 5 times. Then it got down here where it's printed the message, okay, I'll stop asking. Okay, so it'll go through the amount of times you told it to, then it'll move on. We can also set up a custom range. That can be important where, so if it's just the number of times, you want it to do something a number of times, then for X in range and then however number times you want it to do it, that will work fine. But sometimes the number, the index that the for loop is counting is important, and you want to use that in some way for your code. And you'll see lots of examples of that throughout the course. And so sometimes you want to set up a custom range. Maybe you don't want it to start from 0. Maybe you want it to start from 10. And you want it to count from 10 up to, but not including 20. Okay. So again, you'll get 10 numbers, but they will start from 10. It'll include 10, but it will not include the top number. So we can adapt the range by passing in 2 inputs. The first number is the number I want you to start from, and I want you to include that one. Then separate our inputs via a comma, and then the second input I'm putting in here is the value I want you to go up to but not include. So you need to remember that. So if you wanted 20 included, you'd have to put 21 here. If you don't want 20 included, you'd put 20. And here I'm just printing whatever the value of X is. So that'll count from 10 all the way up to 19. We can also customize the increment of the for loop as well. So let's say we wanted to go from 2 up to, but not including 30. But rather than count up in 1s, we wanted to count up in 2s. And we can do that. We can give it a third input. These are known as arguments in a function. They're basically just the inputs that we pass to it. For a range, we have to give at least 1 input, which will be the maximum. If we give 2 inputs, it'll be from this to this, but not including it. And if we pass 3 inputs, it'll be from this to this, but not including it. And then the third argument, the third input, would be what's the increment. So by default, that'll be 1. If you don't specify it, the default is 1. Just as if we only specify the maximum by just putting in 1 input, the default, it will start from 0. So this here says start counting from 2, go up to but don't include 30, and count up in 2s. And in my loop, I'm just going to print the value of X, and you'll see that's exactly what it does. It'll start at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It goes all the way up to 28. It'll then tick over to 30, but obviously then at that point it would stop. Okay. If you were to start that, say, from 1 and do an increment of 2, but with the same limit, then what would happen is it would go up to 29. It would then tick over to 31. It's exceeded the limit, it wouldn't include it. Okay, so you still wouldn't get 30. It would, if it's gone at least past the limit, then it stops. We can also do a decrement as well if we wanted to. It's exactly the same. We just put a minus number in front of the number by which you want to decrement each time. So in this case, this says start at 10, go down to but do not include 0, and the decrement is -1, so it'll count down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, at which point it will stop, because the next time through it will get to 0. We can also, and this is probably more, so the increments and decrements and custom ranges you might use. You probably won't that much, to be honest. Most for loops are going to look like that. I want to do it this number of times, albeit probably with some more interesting code than just printing the number. Or like this. Because a for loop, I mentioned when we give it as a range, we say range 10, what that's actually doing is giving us an iterable object, a list, something you can iterate through. It's giving us the list of numbers from 0 up to but not including 10. We can actually explicitly specify a list of our own making as well. And that can be useful when we want to say, okay, I want you to go through each element of my list and do something with it. And so let's imagine we've got a list here, and we'll cover lists properly in a minute, that I've set up. Remember, we use square brackets for a list. My list is called my list. and it contains 5 elements, the numbers 1 and 10, the string Dan, the boolean true, and the string HSMA. And I can write a for loop that will go through each element of that list. And so here I can say, and to make it clear, I could use X again if I wanted to. Again, doesn't matter. But to make it clearer, I've decided to call it element. So I can make that clear. Okay, yeah, I'm going through each element in my list. So for element in my list, and all I'm going to get it to do here is nothing particularly interesting. I'm just going to get it to print out whatever that element is. And so it'll start with the first element of the list, which is the number 1. It'll print the number 1. Then it'll move to the next one, which is the number 10. It'll print 10, and so on until it gets to the end of the list. That's effectively exactly the same as what you're doing when you say for x in range 10. It's just you're using range 10 to shortcut, give me a list of numbers up to, but not including 10. But you're doing the same, Python's doing the same thing behind the scenes. But this is particularly useful because if it's not about, I want you to do this so many times, it's about, I need you to do this stuff for each element in a list of stuff I've got. Then, and you will use that quite a lot, then you can use this kind of structure where you say for element in the name of your list, and then whatever you want to do to that.